Let's face it, liberals are offended by everything.
Right on.
And they have zero sense of humor.
Right on.
Huh?
Right on. It's the party game that pokes fun at political correctness and liberalism run amok.
But making fun of them is hilarious for the rest of us.
So play right on and mock the progressive left and their fake news media counterparts in a variety of categories, such as race hustle, the wussification of America, earth snobs, Islam abomination, Hollywood hypocrites, and campus coddling. Feminism follies and rainbow games, and don't forget, millennial entitlement and many others.
Right on, created by conservatives for conservatives.
Because mocking the left feels so right on.
Give the gift of all year long by going to RightOnGame.com.
That's RightOnGame.com. Use promo code MOJO50 for a 10% discount. That's RightOnGame.com, promo code MOJO50 for 10% off.
And while you're there, check out the new drinking game option.
Warning, microaggressions contained in this box. Millennials and snowflakes will be offended by its contents. Retreating to safe spaces are highly recommended.
RightOnGame.com, promo code MOJO50 for 10% off. RightOnGame.com.
You can't handle the truth.
The Denise Simon Experience. The Truth Matrix. Vetting, exposing, drilling down to the truth.
Rolling Thunder, this is Hitman. Seat over. Hitman, this is Rolling Thunder. Seat out.
The Denise Simon Experience. Exposing politics, lies, demagoguery, spin, fraud.
Grid to suppress. Mike Charlie, 4-3-5-9er-2-1. Grid to mark. Mike Charlie, 4-7-3-9er, 8-9er, out.
Promoting individual situational awareness. Question, probe, notice, ask why.
Mark smoke on the deck. 2 rounds HEPT. Gas TOT 5-3.
And now, the Denise Simon Experience.
And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Denise Simon Experience. You know, it seems like we don't talk about terrorism anymore. Why? Because we are told that we have defeated Islamic State. And I would argue not so fast, because we have ideologies. And, you know, we still have battlefields in Syria and Yemen and Libya and Iraq and Afghanistan and several other places. So given that, we still have a terrorism component and an ideology component. And so what do? Well, I go grab the shirt sleeve of Samantha Mandelas. Samantha's been on Denise Simon Experience previously as a stellar guest. She is a coordinator for the Middle East Forum. She's a writer and a researcher, and I would say very skilled when it comes to the Middle East culture and history. So with that, thank you, Samantha, for being with us.
Thank you so much, Denise, for your kind words and for having me on the show again. It's a pleasure.
You're welcome. We really have, I would say, 2 countries that are quite at issue when it comes to ideology and all things militant Islam and whatnot, and that is Qatar and Iran. And we seem to continue to focus on Iran, and rightly so. But one that just kind of gets left out of it all is Qatar, or otherwise known as Qatar. And yet, you know, there's a lot of the, what I would say, the Middle Eastern countries, Saudi Arabia and Kuwait, the United Arab Emirates, you know, they isolated Qatar, and rightly so, because they, that country's leadership just seems to keep adding gasoline to the fire. But we're not, the United States is not forcing them into some kind of consequence. Tell us your thoughts on the leadership of Qatar.
Well, Qatar is, as you said, very, very problematic for, you know, for the United States and everyone who, you know, believes in pluralism and democracy and American values. The Qatari government is ruled by Wahhabism, this extremist Islamist ideology inspired by the scholar Ibn Wahhab, who lived in I believe he lived in the Hijaz in the 1700s or thereabouts. And so Qatar, part of the way that they use their many millions and millions of dollars of oil money is to export that ideology, and we're seeing a lot of that ideology exported in the United States, whether that's overtly or covertly. So I think there are institutions and political lobbyists and even Congress people that have been duped by Qatar, and we're really sort of seeing the consequences of that now.
And yet, another group that we hardly ever speak to is the Muslim Brotherhood. And I would argue that since we're not really paying any attention to them, they're probably enjoying a lot of that, and I would say expanding their reach once again with their headquarters in Doha. Is that right?
Yes, for sure. So that's another thing that Qatar has been guilty of in the last several years. They have the Qataris have in the last few years, of course, Yusuf al-Qaradawi, who's regarded as one of the primary Brotherhood ideologues and clerics. So he's been enjoying, a luxurious paid life in Qatar. He had a long-standing program on Al Jazeera Arabic, which he used to spread Islamist ideology, anti-Semitism, anti-Westernism, and the acceptance of violence and terrorism. We've also seen that Qatar has given Hamas members a safe haven, as well as having given even Taliban members a safe haven. So, all the while that they are protecting the masterminds and leadership of terrorist groups, then they've sort of launched this propaganda campaign in the United States to try and convince the American people that, it's a benevolent country. They're on our side when it comes to fighting terrorism. But it's, our view is that this campaign is entirely duplicitous and not at all indicative of their real motives.
They have an investment fund, Samantha, that they're buying. They have bought and continue to buy a lot of real estate, hence influence in the United States, especially Washington, D.C. That seems to be their other channel to lobbying lawmakers and government, power, if you will. And why are we all allowing this? Nobody really speaks to it. I mean, China does the same thing. Russia has been doing the same thing. China's doing it for one reason. Russia's doing it for another. But, terrorism is off the headlines. And I think it's kind of a dangerous game here that we're letting the Qataris get away with so much. What say you?
Right, absolutely. So, like you said, the Qataris have sort of bought influence, both sort of in the real estate arena, but also in the nonprofit arena. So you see groups like the Qatar Foundation International, which is an organization based in Washington, but actually run through the Qatar Foundation, which is run by the Qatari royal family. So QFI, Qatar Foundation International, is ostensibly their mission is to spread and facilitate the teaching of Arabic. But in reality, they've sort of exercised power as a propaganda machine. So they influence curricular decisions in all levels of education. And the executive director of QFI, Maggie Mitchell-Salem, it actually came out that she was sort of shaping and almost ghostwriting a lot of Washington Post writer Jamal Khashoggi's columns. So his sort of his anti-Saudi, anti-Israel, pro-Muslim Brotherhood stance, the QFI, the supposedly benign nonprofit, was working with him on writing that, and of course the Washington Post and the editor Karen Ataya ate it all up. Now you see that the Muslim Public Affairs Council, which MPAC, which purports to be an organization that's just dedicated to boosting cooperation and understanding with Muslims in media, they're having their annual media awards in the next few weeks, at which they are posthumously honoring Khashoggi and also honoring Karen Ataya. So they're not mentioning that Khashoggi was essentially a Muslim Brotherhood stooge, and that Karen Ataya, his editor at the Washington Post, allowed all of this to go on under her very nose. By contrast, she actually implied, after MEF, Middle East Forum, put on a conference examining Qatar's malign influence, she tweeted an implication that we were being paid to do so by the Saudis, which of course we weren't. So we just found that very ironic. But yeah, those are just some examples of how Qatar has inculcated itself in the American nonprofit, almost social justice world.
Social justice is exactly right, and thanks for mentioning that. And what with it's almost as though the Washington Post, hello Jeffrey Bezos, was fine with all of this on hiring Jamal Khashoggi, and he's been dead a while, brutal death, okay, but he still pops up in our headlines every once in a while,
right.
And I think it was Congress that just passed a resolution that the United States, under the war power something or other, that we have to stop assisting the Saudis in the war in Yemen against the Houthis, because we're going to still punish Saudi Arabia for killing Jamal Khashoggi. It's like, what? What?
It's odd. I mean, not that I, sanction the assassination of anybody,
right.
or mistreatment of journalists. But the lionization of Khashoggi in the mainstream media is pretty. It's clearly sort of partially orchestrated by Qatar and just not truthful. And it's not as if this is Saudi Arabia's first ever human rights offense. It was only very recently, for instance, that women were allowed to operate a motor vehicle in Saudi Arabia. Homosexuality is still illegal and punishable by death, it practices what essentially amounts to religious apartheid, where non-Muslims in Saudi Arabia have dramatically fewer rights and are frequently mistreated. Just the fact that sort of we've allowed the Qatari propaganda campaign to suddenly make us start looking at Saudi Arabia at just the moment when the country has become, slightly more, however temporarily or permanently, friendly towards the United States. I mean, we're really letting ourselves be manipulated by Qatar, and all the while we haven't said boo about Qatar's in its own record of insistent human rights abuses. The essential almost murder of South Asian migrant workers that are working on the FIFA stadium. We've ignored that completely.
Yes, thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Nobody speaks on that one. Yeah.
Right. And at the conference that we had in February, we also held a panel that discussed, Qatar's duplicity and machinations in getting the FIFA World Cup to be hosted in Qatar in the first place. Apparently, amongst the 9 or so countries that put in a bid, Qatar's Qatar's bid and proposal for the World Cup was judged the worst of the proposals, and yet somehow it still won the vote to host the game. So, how is that possible? So, Qatar's duplicity extends to all areas, and I don't for a minute think that any policymaker in the United States should believe the emir or his family when they talk about standing with the U.S. Not for a minute.
Then, Samantha, we have the Taliban component. Under the Obama administration, we were told that the Taliban 5 commanders released from Gitmo in trade for Bo Bergdahl, we sent them to Doha. No, we're not giving them an embassy. We're not giving them a diplomatic post. Well, it turns out we actually did. And then we're in these discussions. What kind of discussions, I really don't know, but we have an envoy by Zalmay Khalilzad, who is leading the peace talks with the Taliban, and yet Afghanistan is not in any part of these discussions, and it affects their country exclusively. So isn't it rather remarkable that we haven't put pressure on Qatar? We just accept the fact that Qatar paid for this diplomatic post, and then all of a sudden we have elevated the leadership of the Taliban in Doha?
Yeah, it's quite odd, and I think it's just a symptom of the larger problem, that we've been unable to call it what it is, and to classify Qatari machinations as damaging to the United States. And it's not always clear to me, for instance, why that's the case. But one of the reasons could be that at the moment, the United States still has a certain degree of dependence on Qatar. Our Al Udeid Air Base is still located in Qatar. It's a large American military facility that is located within the country. And I personally, I hope that it will be moved so that we don't, that lessen the degree of our dependence on. But the other thing is that they wield, the Qataris wield a certain amount of influence given all the oil that they produce. That's where their massive wealth comes from. It's a small country, only 300,000 people, and yet it's one of the wealthiest countries in the world. So perhaps part of it is, the power of the dollar, the money that they wield, and again, the presence of an American military facility there makes me personally very nervous. So I think, there are reasons that perhaps we haven't been as tough on Qatar as we should have, morally speaking.
We're just kind of picking our priorities. We're picking our fights here. And right now it's China, it's Venezuela, it's several other things. And the matter of Qatar has kind of gone down on the list, I would imagine. Is that right?
Yeah, I think so. I look at this from the lens of American Islamism, and to me, we're seeing a proliferation of Qatari influence, and it's really worrying to us. So this is something that we at Middle East Forum have focused deeply on. But I think you're right, and it's not receiving the type of scrutiny that it maybe should be in policy making circles. There is a lot of concern about China. There's still a lot of concern about Iran. There's concern about Turkey. Even and of course concern about Venezuela and other places in South America. So yes, and perhaps my opinion is colored a little bit by my work and my focus on the Middle East and Islamist threats. But I do believe that Qatar should remain at the top of our priority list for sure.
I'm agreeing with that. And we have this division of the Treasury called the Committee for Foreign Investment in the United States. And, those over at Treasury, I don't think are doing the kind of work on foreign investment dollars that they need to be doing. I mean, they're paying attention to China and Huawei, and we're paying attention to Russia, but we're not paying attention to the Qatari investments in the United States. And that kind of influence. So, again, is that kind of a priority thing, choose your battles?
I think, the example that comes to my mind is Al Jazeera, So Al Jazeera, of course, is the major Qatari media conglomerate. And in the last 20 years, it's grown to feature over 65 bureaus in 65 different countries. It's including now AJ Plus, which is a platform that produces viral videos aimed at a millennial left-wing audience, promoting ideas that are totally counter to Islamist values, like, LGBTQ allyship and feminism and sort of the separation of church and state, things like, classic kind of and when people share AJ Plus videos, it's not exactly clear that these are videos that criticize and castigate the West and Israel under the guise of human rights and using a language of liberalism. It's not clear that these videos are being produced and orchestrated by one of the worst human rights abusers on the planet.
So it's the Kuwaiti not the Kuwaiti, but the Qatari version of a KGB active measures thing that is going on. And you've got Al Jazeera English, and of course Al Jazeera America shut down, and I think it was 2016. There are lawsuits pending, and one of the lawsuits alleges that the senior staff at Al Jazeera America tried to make the reporters adopt a pro-Muslim Brotherhood line, and so things like that. But Al Jazeera English still exists. It recently released 2 different documentary series that purport to expose the quote-unquote Israel lobby in both London and Washington, D.C. And essentially these are like, documentary series that sort of recycle the old trope of Jewish power and Jewish control in our anti-Semitic. But people are eating it up, so... Samantha, we're very grateful for your insight on all of this and for your time on this. I'm going to keep calling on you because what you add to the discussion is just huge for context and history. So thank you for that. And ladies and gentlemen, there's more coming your way. So make sure that you stay with us.
This is Don Newen with Cowboy Logic Radio, and I carry my Sig Sauer 9mm every day. It's like a MasterCard. I never leave home without it.
And I'm glad you do, given that you work in Atlanta every day, talking about a rough place to work.
Well, Donna, I would say that most of our beloved Cowboy Logic Radio listeners not only own, but carry their weapons, too. It's just the thing to do nowadays.
So do I, Don. And we need to share with our listeners a fantastic weapons company, Tar River Arms. Oh, and I should mention, they were founded by United States Marine, enough said, right? Badass-o-matic.
TarRiverArms.com. That's TAR Riverarms.com.
Tar River Arms, America's first virtual gun store, makes it easier and more comfortable than ever to purchase your firearm online. And through 3D interactive experiences, you can even view and inspect that gun you're purchasing.
They even have weekly specials that eliminate shipping and broker fees, Donna. Great guns, great prices, and great service. And remember, Tar River Arms is veteran-owned and operated.
Don, would you expect anything less from a Marine?
No, ma'am.
At TarRiverArms.com, you can search by caliber, manufacturer, and firearm types. Revolvers, semi-automatic pistols, including your Sigdon, short-barrel rifles, long rifles, shotguns, and NFA silencers. They even have very hard-to-find products such as the H&K MP5. Totally badass.
Tar River Arms have some of the coolest high-end tactical weapons made, all at great prices.
TarRiverArms.com, U.S. Marine owned and operated.
Hoorah!
Hey gang, did you know that the big cellular companies fund liberal causes and candidates, not Patriot Mobile?
You're correct, Donna. Did you know that the big mobile companies have spent over $100 million to elect liberal candidates? They also fund liberal causes, agendas, and organizations such as Planned Parenthood, not Patriot Mobile.
Here's how it works. You, our beloved Cowboy Logic Radio listeners, pay your cell phone bill every month. Then Big Mobile takes your money and gives millions to liberal candidates who authorize subsidies to provide free cell service, Obama phones, to do-nothings who vote for more liberals so they can keep getting more free stuff that you pay for. Not Patriot Mobile.
So here's how you fight back. Switch to Patriot Mobile with unlimited plans starting as low as $20 a month and stop funding the big cellular companies.
Feel good about funding the right agendas. Every dollar you spend makes a statement. What message are you sending?
And it's easy to switch. You can even keep your same number, and they've got great nationwide coverage that includes Double D Ranch.
Visit them online at patriotmobile.com or call them at 1-800-A-PATRIOT.
And for any of the guilt-ridden liberals, that's 1-800-272-8746.
Created by conservatives for conservatives. Their name says it all. Patriot Mobile. Do it now. patriotmobile.com or 1-800-A-PATRIOT.
Ladies and gentlemen, what message are you sending?
Thanks, ladies and gentlemen, for hanging with us here on the Denise Simon Experience. Here's a topic nobody in media, nobody really anywhere talks about it, and that's rent control. I mean, it has to be one of the most scandalous things, and we don't even know I would argue, the cost to the taxpayer and to real estate owners. So what do? Well, Ethan Blevins is with us from Pacific Legal Foundation. And thank you, Ethan. Interesting thing is I think you're addressing some new rent control stuff in the state of Washington. Is that right?
Well, I'm hoping to head off addressing it, I suppose. It's kind of a popular topic in Washington right now. There is currently a state ban on rent control laws in Washington, but there's been a lot of effort to overturn that, and it's sort of growing in popularity, overturning that ban. And so Oregon's statewide rent control law sort of galvanized the activist forces in Washington, and who are really pushing to overturn the ban.
To what end? I mean, it's just because they have real estate's just gone out of the roof, or what? I mean, there's a real estate crisis?
Well,
housing crisis, maybe?
Yeah, I think like most urban areas on the West or East Coast, it's just grown really, really expensive. And I think cities and states don't look in the mirror and see that it's largely, zoning and other kinds of regulations that have driven up housing costs. And so they instead think that increased regulation is going to be the answer. And it isn't. I mean, it's actually a really simple problem. It's just apparently really hard to get people to see it, which is you just need to build more housing. That's the answer, not rent control or other regulations like it.
But okay, hold on here. So, Ethan, I agree, build more housing. But then again, I would say what does that do to that even pricing? I mean, isn't it forcing investment to get waivers or, conversions of existing housing? I mean, I see there's a lot of moving parts to this whole rent control thing.
Yes, that's true. I mean, the root problem that you have with rent control is that it's rooted basically in sort of economics 101. I mean, you learn about this as a college freshman in any economics class. It's presented sort of as a key example of supply and demand, because when you put an artificial squeeze on prices like you do with rent control, that means less people are going to want to provide that, and it means more people are going to want it. And so what you get is a housing shortage. And that's exactly what you want to avoid in these urban areas where you have a lot of people moving in. They're popular for a variety of reasons. You need to increase the housing supply, usually by upzoning and allowing micro-housing. And there's a variety of solutions here, but putting a squeeze on prices is the opposite of a solution.
Isn't there a tax base loss too under rent control? In other words, in property taxes, people pay X, but in rent control, they don't pay X. They pay X minus whatever percentage.
Yeah, I think that's often the case. I mean, you're going to have tax issues. You're going to have. I mean, the big problem for landlords is that they operate on a margin. So when you reduce that margin, in order to maintain the margin, I should say, they're going to not engage in as much maintenance. They're not going to improve the housing stock because they need to maintain a margin. And that's what happens. You end up with shabbier housing. That certainly affects property taxes, but affects tenants and landlords alike. It doesn't help either party. It helps a small group of people who are already kind of settled in, and can keep a rent-controlled price on their house for the indefinite future.
And then there's a whole nother layer of bureaucracy. When you establish a rent control condition, then you've got to have a bureaucratic government agency that enforces all that. So now you've added yet another layer of stupidness, right?
Right. Well, and getting back to the harm to the taxpayer, whenever this is kind of a cost that's never considered in regulations. You're creating an entire new structure for enforcement, and it's going to get complicated, and it's going to cost taxpayers money. And the question is, does it do what it purports to do? And it doesn't. It ends up costing people more money in the form of taxes, and it helps a very small number of tenants who are well established. And I think this is why it continues to get peddled, is that there's a small group of powerful people who have benefits. And the costs are high for the people that doesn't benefit, but it's kind of diffused among a large group of people who aren't as educated and aren't as inclined to fight it, because it doesn't cost every individual quite as much as it benefits this small group that it helps.
I don't know anything about the fair housing laws, but I would argue, just based on that title, Fair Housing Laws, that rent control is a violation of fair housing laws.
That's interesting. It could well be. I mean, what the real shame is that the people who end up in rent controlled units, where somebody has been living in a place for 20 years that's way below market rate because inflation's gone well above the yearly increase that a landlord's able to do. That's not going to be the poorest of the poor. That's usually somebody who's well established. There's no way to guarantee that you're actually going to be helping the vulnerable. And it's actually the vulnerable people who are usually toughing it out in the open market, where rent control has caused those prices to escalate. So it's an economic failure. It really is science denial at its core, because it's so well established by economists across the spectrum that it's bad. Paul Krugman, I think it was back in 2002, wrote an op-ed, and I mean he's not a conservative economist, to say the least. He's sort of the head of the progressive economics movement of our day, and he came out railing against rent control. So it's really well established. It doesn't work. It's just science denial as surely as as we might see in whatever other area, climate science or GMO products or whatever. It's just the same here. It's just political mythology.
In context, is there really a difference then in rent control to Section 8 housing? I mean, they're almost kind of the same stupid mission, right?
Yes, although ironically, I think probably the Section 8 vouchers are a little bit more economically efficient than rent control, because at least with Section 8 vouchers, you can target, it's easier to target the people who might need help. Landlords all are terrified of taking Section 8 people for a variety of reasons, and they shouldn't be forced to. But Section 8 might be even a little bit better than rent control, even though I don't support Section 8 vouchers for a variety of reasons. But one of the key differences, at least, is that the landlord's is still able to protect their marginal profits with Section 8 vouchers, and the vouchers arguably might be going to more people who need it.
Ethan, where does discrimination fit in? I mean, is there discrimination for the landowner? Is there discrimination in the people who go into rent control? I mean, I would see that there would be some real abuse there. Am I just dreaming that, or is that a given?
No, I don't. I don't think it's a dream. I do think that there probably is discrimination. One of the ironies behind a lot of fair housing laws, slightly separate now from rent control, is that is that they sometimes actually increase discrimination, and that may very well be what's happening with rent control as well.
Does property ever come out of rent control? I mean, if you got a piece of property that is, a piece of housing that is inside a rent control status, and it's been there for 50 years, at the 51st year, does it come out? I mean, is there, or we just keep adding to it?
Well, each of these ordinances is a little bit different, but typically, no. Typically, it's going to stay there. So there's two general kinds of rent control. The first is just a flat cap that just never can move except as approved by a commission or a board. And that really didn't work, and people have generally recognized that, and they've moved to the second form without realizing the second form really has the same problem, which is a limit on rent growth over time. So it's something like, a landlord sets the rent, they decide what the initial rent is when the lease starts, but they can only increase it by such and such a percent every year. Meaning the landlord doesn't have much incentive to keep tenants on, because they can't. The only way they can get that rent to reset is by getting a new tenant in there and establishing a new lease. So that's how most rent control programs work now, and that's the only way to kind of get out from under to start a new lease. But then you're back under that same percentage growth again. The Oregon law is a little different in that it exempts newer housing, and I guess that's their way of trying to make it not as extreme. The problem is that the rent-controlled units inflate the pricing of the units in the uncontrolled market, because the rent control reduces the housing supply. So even in the open market, it hurts housing prices.
Okay, so then we have the tenant. Their income, obviously, at some point would necessarily, in many cases, go up. So how do they keep qualifying for rent control?
Well, all you have to do is get in to a house and stay there. I mean, there's no. This is probably the big difference between Section 8 and rent control. At least with Section 8, you have to qualify. You have to be a certain level, certain percentage of the poverty level or whatever. But with rent control, all you have to do is nab a unit and stay put. And so that's a huge problem, because a lot of the people who are in rent-controlled units are not the poorest of the poor who actually may need help with their housing costs.
Okay, so that into its face is a big problem here. I mean, somebody in Georgia makes $100,000 a year. That equivalent in, let's say, California is $200,000 a year, and they're both in rent control. Something's just wrong there. So I don't know. I mean, virtually every state's got some kind of rent control program, it seems like. Is that right?
A number of states, like Washington, have a ban on rent control on municipalities or counties employing rent control. So there are a few that do that. I mean, the big states where you see it a lot is New York and California, and now, of course, in Oregon. And then there's kind of a variety of places across the states where you'll see it. So it's really, really popular on the coasts where it hasn't been outright banned. And that's where the housing crisis is the worst. And that's where rent control hurts the worst, because what you really need is more housing in those places.
Ethan, they're subsidies, right? I mean, we can call rent control virtually a subsidy for housing payments. So are those federal dollars or state dollars, or are they both?
Well, I mean, one of the things the economists have said is that a direct subsidy, like a Section 8 voucher, would actually just be more efficient than rent control, because when you're just capping what landlords can charge, you're gonna drive them out of the market, mm-hmm. or make them create poor housing quality. So it actually isn't like a subsidy in that really important respect. And I think maybe subsidies might be one of the reasons might be that taxpayers see that as a greater cost to them than rent control. But rent control, as we've discussed, imposes costs on the taxpayer too. So I actually think that subsidies are probably a better route to go. Although I think that an open, free market's generally better for everybody. If we're going to do it, subsidies might be better than rent control.
So this tenant that's, we talk about they get in there and they stay there, but then they really can't ever leave, right? Unless they keep their name on some kind of a lease and sublease it to somebody else if they decide that, hey, I just got offered a job in another state. So now I think that there might be a component for fraud, right?
Well, there has been all these economic studies show that it really does decrease mobility a lot. And mobility is kind of a key indicator of a healthy economy. If you're in a rent control unit and you have very low incentive to move out. In fact, if you move out, all of a sudden your standard of living is going to go way down because you're going to be paying at a market rate. So I mean, I think most landlords probably get around that by entering into contracts where they forbid subleasing. But as I think anybody in the real estate business knows, that subletting and subleasing happens all the time anyway, mm-hmm. whether or not you forbid it. So I do think that is a problem. And of course, people moving in the city are going to be looking for those kinds of subleasing opportunities because it's the only way to get affordable units.
What about maintenance and property deterioration? That I would say, when we talked about the landlords operating on margin, then I would say the condition of the housing itself, year by year, becomes more questionable, such that some of them ought to probably be condemned, right?
Yeah, I mean that is one of the ironies behind the terrible sort of slums we see sometimes. Is that it's typically not landlord greed that leads to that. What it is landlords who need to maintain a margin to make it profitable. And so, the regulation means the rent control means they're not going to maintain those units as well as they should. And they're not. And the other reason is there's not really any incentive for them to compete with other landlords because everybody has to charge the same essentially anyway. So if they had to compete, then we'd find improved housing stock because they're trying to make their housing more more desirable. They're going to maintain it better because they're able to do that and stay within their profit margin. And instead, what you're going to see with rent control is fewer housing, pricier housing, and shabbier housing.
This has got to have a larger effect on property values, right? I mean, I would say that some of these property owners might be standing there with their hands on their hips, stomping their feet, saying, after 25 years, my property value has not gone up, it's gone down because we seem to, keep manifesting this rent control condition.
Yes, definitely. Lower property value is kind of an inevitable result of it all, and yet it's very expensive to rent those units. So it's kind of an ironic. It's a lose-lose for pretty much landlords and tenants alike. What it does is pit tenants against each other. The tenants who are established in those units and the tenants who are trying to push their way in. And so it just helps a subset of well-established tenants.
So, Ethan, what is Pacific Legal's role in this rent control debate?
Well, there hasn't been a lot of, it's still not really well established whether or not rent control laws violate any constitutional guarantees. I mean, at Pacific Legal, we'd argue that it's a regulatory taking because it is a taking of your property interest in getting market rate value for your property. That's still kind of an undecided issue, although the courts that have addressed it have tended to say, this is not a taking of your property. There's a due process issue, as to whether the government's depriving you of an interest in your property without due process of law. So those are the kinds of lenses through which we look at these things. And each rent control law is a little bit different. So it's going to depend on the circumstances, but we still don't have clear law yet as to whether or not these things should be considered okay.
So when you say clear law, is this at the state level, or would this go to, the fair housing laws, or both?
Well, when I mean clear law, I guess I just mean a federal constitutional law. So under, for example, the constitutional requirement, the government can't take property without a just compensation, or can't take property without due process of law. Those are the kinds of laws that we've historically tried to challenge rent control programs under, but unfortunately not without a lot of success. Although it's still, I think, an open possibility to challenge these things in the courts.
When it comes to other organizations, I mean, you've got apartment associations, I would say home builders associations, you got the realtor components, you got housing councils, and, all these kinds of things. All these other organizations, are they on the side of eliminating or tackling or redefining rent control?
It's a great question. I think it depends on the organization and their situation. I mean, the people that are really hurt by rent control laws are small mom and pop landlords. So it's the associations that represent those individuals that are going to be most adamantly opposed to it. As for large leasing companies, it hurts them too, but not as much. And so in a way, they may not be as inclined to fight it because when the mom and pop landlords are driven out by the regulatory burdens placed on them, the parties that can stomach the regulatory burden and cover those costs are these large leasing companies. So in a way, it may not necessarily hurt them. It kind of hurts the little guy landlord, and those are the people who are willing to give tenants a break on their rent sometimes, or that's the kind of landlord you want. You don't want these large impersonal leasing companies that don't have really any mercy when it comes to renting units. But those are the kinds of people who are going to take over property management in rent control jurisdictions.
Going through a legal system and laws and language and amendments and all these kinds of things certainly takes a long time. I'm seeing where Pacific Legal back in 1993 was kind of arguing a matter of housing and impacts on citizens in Berkeley and Santa Monica. So we're still at the argument, eh?
Oh yeah. It's amazing that it hasn't changed. The conversation hasn't changed much, even though time and again, like I said, this is just basically science denial. I mean, it's like a proven policy failure pops up, and we grasp it again, even though everybody who knows anything much about it knows it doesn't work.
Well, it's kind of like raising the minimum wage. I mean, there's always a consequence, isn't there?
Yes, in fact, there's a lot of similarity there. I mean, it's the same supply and demand rules that make it so the minimum wage laws just don't work. Same thing with rent control. It's this. I think people feel like economics maybe isn't a valid science, so we can't rely on it. But I mean, this is science, and these things have been well studied. They don't work. There are solutions out there, but these are not the solutions that people should look to.
I think you guys at Pacific Legal are biting off a big chunk of the Green New Deal in all of this, because I mean, essentially the Green New Deal is arguing for either all rent control or all Section 8, which is going to throw the fair housing law, on upside down, right?
Well, yeah,
early congratulations for taking on the Green New Deal.
Yeah, well, federally imposed rent control would be even more of a nightmare. So that is not something to look forward to.
Well, we've determined, okay, it's bad. We've actually got, case after case, city after city, state after state. Doesn't work. It's not fair. It's bureaucratic. It violates, any kind of maintenance or value to property owners. I mean, what a mess. Gosh, I hope you can take this on and redefine this whole thing for sure. That's a Herculean task. But ladies and gentlemen, huge round of applause to Ethan Blevins at Pacific Legal for a fascinating conversation here. I hope you can get some real traction. So thank you, Mr. Ethan. Ladies and gentlemen, there's more coming your way, so stay with us.
Hey, Donna, Cowboy Logic radio listeners love law enforcement.
That's right, Don. And Charity Magnets designs and produces beautiful, high-quality products for law enforcement supporters and enthusiasts.
They've got very impressive honor badge car magnets.
CharityMagnets.com.
They've got license plate honor badges.
CharityMagnets.com.
They've got cool keychains and license plate frames.
CharityMagnets.com. I'm on their website right now, and this is my favorite, the Honor Badge dog tag. Look at that little doggy with the dog tag. He's so cute.
Donna, we're trying to do an ad read, and you're playing around on their website, which happens to be CharityMagnets.com.
But he's so cute.
Donna.
Okay. Hey, this is huge, too. For each sale, a donation will be made to Cops for Kids with Cancer. Cops for Kids with Cancer has given more than $2.5 million in donations. Yes.
Become a Blue Honor Foundation member today. Like Donna is doing right now, go to CharityMagnets.com.
But he's so cute. All right, use the promo code MOJO for $5 off any purchase. I know you all love and support our brave law enforcement professionals and their families. Show your support today by going to CharityMagnets.com and check out that little puppy. He's so cute. Hey, Don, can we go to the pound, get another rescue dog, please? Pretty
No,
please?
Donna, no. 5 rescue dogs are enough, but I'm going to CharityMagnets.com, and I'm making some purchases right now.
Become a Blue Honor Foundation member today. Enter MOJO at checkout and get $5 off. CharityMagnets.com.
Let's face it, liberals are offended by everything,
Right on.
and they have zero sense of humor.
Right on.
Huh?
Right on. It's the party game that pokes fun at political correctness and liberalism run amok.
But making fun of them is hilarious for the rest of us.
So play right on and mock the progressive left and their fake news media counterparts in a variety of categories, such as race hustle, the wussification of America, earth snobs, Islam abomination, Hollywood hypocrites, and campus coddling. Feminism follies and rainbow games, and don't forget, millennial entitlement and many others.
Right On, created by conservatives for conservatives.
Because mocking the left feels so right on.
Give the gift of all year long by going to RightOnGame.com.
That's RightOnGame.com. Use promo code MOJO50 for a 10% discount. That's RightOnGame.com, promo code MOJO50 for 10% off.
And while you're there, check out the new drinking game option.
Warning, microaggressions contained in this box. Millennials and snowflakes will be offended by its contents. Retreating to safe spaces are highly recommended.
RightOnGame.com, promo code MOJO50 for 10% off. RightOnGame.com.
You can't handle the truth.
The Denise Simon Experience. The Truth Matrix. Vetting, exposing, drilling down to the truth.
Rolling Thunder, this is Hitman. See ya. Over. Hitman, this is Rolling Thunder. See ya out.
The Denise Simon Experience. Exposing politics, lies, demagoguery, spin, fraud.
Grid to suppress. Mike Charlie, 4 tree 5, 9er 2-1. Grid to mark. Mike Charlie, 4-7 tree 9er, 8-9er. Out.
Promoting individual situational awareness. Question, probe, notice, ask why.
Mark smoke on the deck. 2 rounds HEVT. Gas TOT 5-3.
And now, the Denise Simon Experience.
Thanks, ladies and gentlemen, for hanging with us on the Denise Simon Experience. You know, I've often said that those that go into the military, those that are part of the military family, those that are first responders and law enforcement, those that are in the doctors and nurses world, they all have part of a DNA in the helix that some of us don't have. It's like some people can sing, other people can't. Some people can do art, other people can't. But I have got the distinct pleasure of having Gaby Juergans with us, who I would say epitomizes having that very DNA, that very kind of service, pay it forward, charity, giving kind of component in her. She is the founder of Homefront Girl. You can find her work at homefrontgirl.com. And what a remarkable whole story. She in just a few minutes that I've come to know her, I feel like I've been cheated because I didn't know her sooner. But welcome to the show, Gaby.
Oh, Denise, thank you so much. I feel the same way. Absolutely. You're a rock star in your own way.
Oh, quit. Don't oversell it.
Oh, you are. but thank you. And you're right. What you said, paying it forward. It's such a part of military life. It's who we are while we're in it. And as military families, we serve along our military men and women who we support. And it's, it's something that after you leave the military, you know, as I mentioned to you, to me, it feeds my soul to continue to be able to give back to our community in some way. So I've been very proud that a lot of the collections that I've created have paid it forward to a military charity. And even in the small ways, like when I hear from spouses clubs and they want some items from Homefront Girl so that they can auction them up for the scholarship funds. It's another way of giving back. I used to be one of those wives that used to ask for donations, so I know exactly where they come from. So
in your world, there is a transition from going from uniformed life wherever it may take you across the world, and then transitioning out of that to go into civilian life. And then it's kind of like, now what do you do? And I just heard a story the other day that, a fella said he was less fearful about getting orders to go to some forward operating base in Afghanistan than he was going on his first job interview in civilian life, which terrified him. And so there's a certain amount of I would say guts or cleverness that once you go from military life to civilian life, that has to be found. You got to go deep in the belly to go find the cleverness and the resourcefulness to essentially manufacture a new adventure. Correct, Gaby?
Absolutely. I think that's so totally true, and I can certainly remember. Well, I think what happens is, especially if they've served for a long time, in the military. The military is, you're part of a sisterhood and a brotherhood, and brothers in arms, sisters in arms, and you just, it's what I often told manufacturers that when I first started Homefront Girl, because nobody had ever looked at this community as a demographic in the retail world at all.
Right,
I mean, you always see things with the Globe and the Anchor, of course, for our Marines, and those are intellectual properties of the services, and I don't use any of them because that's theirs, and I don't add an extra layer to my designs, which you would have to if I were using them. So you're used to seeing those, but there wasn't a feminine voice in anything, and I was in sort of a gift giver. So, and I was always looking for gifts. And when we got out, and there's adjustments all the way, but I think what I discovered in putting designs forward, that what I was trying to do is sort of cement the bonds within our community about this extraordinary life that we all lived, and at the same time introduced to the civilian community by way of a cup or a mug or whatever it was, through the Yankee Candle Company. It was these designs that they put out, this limited edition designs on their candles, and but it was a way of giving the civilian community kind of a hint about who this community is.
Mm-hmm.
So it was twofold, and I think that's what I wanted to do. But when you leave that life, you sort of are leaving it's kind of scary, because civilian life, I think they learn. I mean, it's not the same work ethic. It's not the same in so much of what you're used to.
No.
So that's a big adjustment. But I will say that I think our men and women who served our country are probably some of the best human resources could go to and pull from, because they are just leaders, and they know how to work as a team, and that I just think the world of them.
Well, military life has its checks and balances, and there's a sense of competition for promotion or getting an assignment, or, there's rules and there's structures and there's limitations. And in the civilian world, we're finding that it used to be all that. And I think there's a major degradation. So when you come out of the military and go into civilian life, we need that leadership out here in the civilian world. We don't have it anymore. So I think with Homefront Girl, you've taken the lessons learned from military life and applied those things with some creativity and some resourcefulness, and certainly giving a female voice to it all, correct?
Absolutely. One of the best letters I ever got, thank you for everything you said. One of the best letters I got was from a military who's become a very dear friend now. But she wrote to me just out of the blue when she had discovered Homefront Girl, and I remember getting this letter, and she said, and she gave me permission to share it with any manufacturer anywhere, she said, and what she said was that she wished she would have had these products when she went through all of the deployments. Now, she's now a military caregiver. She's also a former fellow of the Senator Elizabeth Dole Military Caregiver Program.
Mm-hmm.
She is working with the Red Cross, and she's a speaker. She wrote a book, Sleeping with the War, and just extraordinary woman. But when she wrote me that letter, what struck me about it is that she said exactly those things. There's a feminine voice. The military calls us dependent, but we're more independent than they can ever imagine. And and then she told me, I especially feel drawn to your design. I am the other half of the brave. And it also, for me, that's exactly what I wanted to put out. And when I Homefront Girl, it's not about saying that there aren't spouses that are male. It was just that I was the Homefront Girl, it's just, I'm the design, they needed me to come up with a name.
Mm-hmm.
But the tagline is for anyone that's ever shared their hero with the world, and who doesn't, and so there's so many that are first responders families that have taken to it because they share their hero, their loved one. Our military men and women do not call themselves heroes, none that I know of. And, but we consider them our heroes because they go forward and do what has to be done. And we love them. And, and they'll turn around and tell you, I'm no hero, I was just doing my job. And they'll say that my family's the hero, the ones that are back home, keeping things together, having Murphy's Law visit them every single time there's a deployment, which it does. So, the car goes on the blank, it just breaks down. The kids are acting up. I mean, it's just like, I did one design that was like, it was a wine glass. It was really funny. I was really hoping I could actually do a whole line of wine glasses because I wanted to do them. But the design was simple, and it said the deployment zone. The wine, it's here for your protection. So it's a little tongue in cheek, but it's the reality of it is that it's a lifestyle. And I think in putting across messages and different products, I've got leggings. I design all of my own camos, but they're the camos for us. I mean, they're not grandpa's camos, and they're certainly not, the DCUs or anything like that. They're not like that. But they're trendy. I love color. I do love fashion. I am self-taught. I always say that very, very strongly because I want any listener out there who is thinking, well, I'm past my time, or, especially military wives, because it's very difficult to keep a career, if any, when you're in this life. That it is never too late for a second act in your life, and you can, you can do whatever it is that you want to do. You just, I did it to my much surprise, and through cancer. So I did it through that too. So I kept it going. I went to chemo. I came back. I worked on Homefront Girl on my computer. I traveled with an iMac back and forth to Johns Hopkins, where I got my treatment. It's that core belief that I think our men and women in the military have, which is, just get the job done and get it done right.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just putting your head focused on the goal. And that I learned by living this life my whole life. I learned that kind of discipline.
I'm of the notion that the military, while we all speak English, I think you guys have a different dialect. I think you have a different kind of language component, at least of which is all the acronyms. But there's a certain understanding, there's a certain connective tissue that needs to be imparted in the civilian world that we've lost. And with finding a new adventure in the civilian world, you have done remarkable things. I mean, with the things that you have created through your art, and then applying them to the things that are being picked up, like, the coffee mugs and the blankets and, the travel stuff and the greeting cards. It kind of continues to put that message out there. So there's a different success. It's not only in the work that you do, but the message kind of is out there for everybody else to see if they would really see it. Is that right, Gaby?
I think so, absolutely. I was really taken with my Instagram account. When I started seeing the hashtag Homefront Girl kind of take off, and I thought, these girls are thinking of themselves as homefront girls, and it's just started to take off. And and essentially, when people ask me who is the homefront girl, I could always give them the shtick that I had to come up with for my agent. But in reality, it's anyone that has loved someone, within the military community. Yes, it's anyone that's loved someone who's served in our military and shared her hero with the world. Mm-hmm. And because they do, and it's a tough life. And yes, we do have our own lingo that, yes, it goes beyond the acronyms, although the acronyms are something to behold and learn very quickly, And I actually did I have Homefront Baby. It's a Homefront Baby line that I'm hoping to get. Any manufacturers out there who are interested in the Homefront Baby line, please call me. But it's really, really adorable and cute. And what I've tried to do with Homefront Girl is it's sort of like an umbrella. So there's Homefront Pets because we love our pets. And so I have a lot of a collection. I built all of, service harnesses and beds and things like that. But it's got our lingo to it. It's got that flavor to it. And then Homefront Baby, and then Homefront Kids, because I feel that our kids, to see a reflection of their life in, like, school books or school folders or backpacks or, anything along those lines, or shirts to say I serve too, or I am the other half of the brave. So I put all that out there. And so there's all of these things but definitely the lingo, like even the one for Homefront Kids, I did this on a backpack that is on the site now. And it just, it was a word cloud. It said military life. And on it says, I know what PCS means, where am I from? Everywhere,
Yeah, I remember that one. Yeah, I remember that one.
So it's that kind of a thing. And, and I have often said, also too, is, we have that term battle buddy, that the military guys will use, of course, but when we go into a rear deployment, the forward deployment, there's a rear D, and that's where we go to, for answers about what's going on and when they're coming back and stuff like that. But you go through a briefing, a briefing of sorts and I remember our senior wives talking to us about, find your battle buddy, your battle buddy. And so the verbiage becomes a part of the family's life as well. So there's no, a military kid can, rattle off just as good as any wife, all of the terms, what it means, and they do. And that's kind of makes that, which is for me as an artist, that's what I wanted to see out there, because I wanted that kind of, so I have a mug, keep calm and call your battle buddy. And along those lines, also the empowering thing that I wanted from moms as well. I taught him to be good. He taught me to be brave. And then it's hashtag military mom. There's a lot of the sentiments, I think, that are emotional for me because I kept journals my whole life.
Wow.
And I was very observant. So when I went to military memorials and just events that would trigger, I would just write them down. So when I started to do this, I had to dip into something. And like I had mentioned before the interview, I had a lot of time and a lot of winters to get through after retirement. So I pulled from that and started to see that there was something like, there was one military wife, no rank, just strength. And that became a bracelet with a paracord, and it just said no rank, just strength. And it's that reminder to this community and to these women that you are strong. You may not have the rank, but you're strong, and you get through this. Or, the design, I've got this. I wore that throughout my entire chemo battle and, all of it. I put that on my head, and it was a hat I had designed through an ESCO, and I never in a million years thought I'd be wearing it because I was going into, to fight stage 3. But it kept me going, and I kept a journal called When the World Turned Pink. And I shared that one with the Homefront Girl fan page. And I was just so impressed by how many reached out and shared their story and their cancer battle. And I was also shocked by how many military wives get cancer. But then you correlate it with the fact that stress is a big contributor to cancer. It's a stressful life that we lead. So,
well, you've made the best of all of that, as I have seen. And you clearly got, I think it's the beginning of the adventure, but your adventure it speaks to a volume of people, women out there just like you, that we need to necessarily hear about and see that there is success, there's resilience, there's, the old term, true grit, and looking through, your good work from a clothing line to a handbag line to the pets and, all these. I mean, that's true grit there, Gaby. Great success. It's way fun to hear about this. I hope you'll come back too, because, we want to kind of keep paying it forward, as you say. There's reward in all of that.
Absolutely, Jeannie. I would love to. And the other thing, for another time, and I think it's something you'd be interested in, is the 2020 rule law for former military spouses that I'm working very hard, and hopefully with 2 senators' offices that I've already been in touch with, to make a change in that law. And it's
yes.
And it's a law that impacts military families, military spouses, and it's unfair. So,
ladies and gentlemen, big, huge round of applause to Gaby Juergans. Please visit the website homefrontgirl.com. Thank you so much, Gaby. Please come back soon. And ladies and gentlemen, there's more coming your way, so stay with us.
This is Don Newen with Cowboy Logic Radio, and I carry my Sig Sauer 9mm every day. It's like a MasterCard. I never leave home without it.
And I'm glad you do, given that you work in Atlanta every day, talking about a rough place to work.
Well, Donna, I would say that most of our beloved Cowboy Logic Radio listeners not only own, but carry their weapons too. It's just the thing to do nowadays.
So do I, Don. And we need to share with our listeners a fantastic weapons company, Tar River Arms. Oh, and I should mention, they were founded by United States Marine, enough said, right? Badass-o-matic.
TarRiverArms.com. That's TAR Riverarms.com.
Tar River Arms, America's first virtual gun store, makes it easier and more comfortable than ever to purchase your firearm online. And through 3D interactive experiences, you can even view and inspect that gun you're purchasing.
They even have weekly specials that eliminate shipping and broker fees, Donna. Great guns, great prices, and great service. And remember, Tar River Arms is veteran-owned and operated.
Don, would you expect anything less from a Marine?
No, ma'am.
At TarRiverArms.com, you can search by caliber, manufacturer, and firearm types. Revolvers, semi-automatic pistols, including your SIG, Don, short barrel rifles, long rifles, shotguns, and NFA silencers. They even have very hard-to-find products such as the H&K MP5. Totally badass.
Tar River Arms have some of the coolest high-end tactical weapons made, all at great prices.
TarRiverArms.com, U.S. Marine owned and operated.
Hoorah!
Hey, gang, did you know that the big cellular companies fund liberal causes and candidates, not Patriot Mobile?
You're correct, Donna. Did you know that the big mobile companies have spent over $100 million to elect liberal candidates? They also fund liberal causes, agendas, and organizations such as Planned Parenthood. not Patriot Mobile.
Here's how it works. You, our beloved Cowboy Logic Radio listeners, pay your cell phone bill every month. Then Big Mobile takes your money and gives millions to liberal candidates who authorize subsidies to provide free cell service, Obama phones, to do-nothings who vote for more liberals so they can keep getting more free stuff that you pay for. Not Patriot Mobile.
So here's how you fight back. Switch to Patriot Mobile with unlimited plans starting as low as $20 a month and stop funding the big cellular companies.
Feel good about funding the right agendas. Every dollar you spend makes a statement. What message are you sending?
And it's easy to switch. You can even keep your same number, and they've got great nationwide coverage that includes Double D Ranch.
Visit them online at patriotmobile.com or call them at 1-800-A-PATRIOT.
And for any of the guilt-ridden liberals, that's 1-800-272-8746.
Created by conservatives for conservatives. Their name says it all. Patriot Mobile. Do it now. patriotmobile.com or 1-800-A-PATRIOT.
Ladies and gentlemen, what message are you sending?
Thanks, ladies and gentlemen, for hanging with us here on the Denise Simon Experience. I've tapped Tom Del Beccaro on the shoulder, and he's agreed to discuss where we are with this Mueller thing. Tom is a previous guest and a fellow midnight texter. He likes that texting thing. He's the author of The Divided Era, and if you haven't read it, trot on over to Amazon and go get it. He's really quite the busy guy, showing up on TV stations and radio stations and writing for several media outlets, Forbes, Fox News, and so forth. So thanks, Tom, for being with us on the Denise Simon Experience. I think that we are about to have some things really erupt as a consequence of the Mueller report. Next week, I guess, coming out via Bob Barr. I keep calling him Bob Barr, Bill Barr, and then we have the criminal referral by Devin Nunes. So we're almost to be in a real thick of things, are we not?
Yeah, it is going to get dicey here, and Bob Barr is William Barr. I did it with you. Bill Barr is really a footnote in all of this. And this period of time, the Democrats are all, we want to see the report. That's a moment in time. Look, this has actually been played pretty darn well. He kept Rosenstein around, and Rosenstein has said two things now that justify the actions of Attorney General Barr. One, he stayed there. He was there for 2 years, and he signed off on the no obstruction charge, that being Rosenstein.
Mm-hmm.
And then yesterday, Rosenstein said that Barr is doing just about all he can related to producing the report with redactions, which means that Barr is following the law. But it's not going to matter much. Barr is going to be not really talked about once this Mueller report's out. And the reason for that is this is going to be some, 300 to 400 pages, whatever the amount is. And in those 300 to 400 pages, the conclusion will be, of course, that there, in fact, was no collusion, and that the Trump campaign turned down Russian help. But there will be statements in there that Mueller talks about activities of either Trump or his people associated with him that Mueller will cast in a bad light. You already have Jerry Nadler and Adam Schiff making comments about there's collusion, there's open collusion. And the best that they got in that regard, of course, is someone showing up to the Trump Tower. They are likely to get a couple of more rounds of, slingshot material. One doesn't even rise to BB gun material. They're going to get a couple of more things that they get to talk about, but that's not going to change the ultimate conclusion. It will, though, excite CNN. It will excite MSNBC, and they will carry on some more. But it doesn't change the conclusions. And honestly, the independents have started to move away from the Democrats over this. Certainly, viewership has moved away from CNN and MSNBC. Mm-hmm. And if they double down on it, they do it at their own peril.
I'm of the notion that the Mueller report, this is just my gut feeling, it's going to speak to just how wide and deep Russian interference really was at the time. And I think that into itself is really where I'm concentrating, because we know that Russia has had a history of this. I mean, going all the way back to the Reagan era. And I think that piece right there is probably the more important of any. And I would also say that the Mueller report, these Democrats may need to be a little on the cautious side, a careful side, because there could be some indications in there of the Democrats. In other words, we could be seeing some other names on the Democratic side outside of Hillary necessarily included in this. Is that a possibility?
Well, yes, I think the report is going to talk about at length the manner in which Russians attempt to involve themselves in U.S. elections. And they do it in clandestine ways. Mm-hmm. Of course, you and I both know that for 100 years, the U.S. in very public ways attempts to influence foreign elections.
Yes.
So we don't exactly, it's not against the law it's hard for us here to outlaw the actions of foreign governments. We can have laws that say, for instance, a campaign finance law that says you can't give money in the United States. But look, at the end of the day, no one should be surprised that Russia tries to influence our elections, nor that they try and do it in a way that they can't get discovered for doing that. This is who Russia is. Should we improve our capability of stopping that? Of course. But no one should be as surprised about it. Mm-hmm. So, yes, I do think the report will talk about that. But I don't think CNN will. I don't think
No, I agree with that.
And they're going to double down on this, and that's a problem for them to do that, because they have already, because they were so wrong after selling it for 2 years about the Mueller report, mm-hmm. because they were so very wrong, them trying to revive it comes at further risk.
Timing is everything, I would argue, in Washington, D.C. And the very next thing after we went through this 2 days worth of hearings with AG Barr, the very next thing is Julian Assange being dragged out of the Ecuadorian embassy in Britain. And then on the heels of that, one of his associates, who I think is actually from Sweden, was arrested in the Quito, Ecuador airport last night. And this guy's name is Ola Mina, I think is his name. And then on the heels of that, there's yet a third person, Vijay Rashad, who owns a Marxist publishing company in India, of all places, that has also weighed in. So we have that kind of brewing. And I only bring up WikiLeaks and Julian Assange's little group because of Roger Stone and the emails and all those other kinds of things. But then right after that, what are we going to have next? We're going to have the Horowitz Inspector General's report. In the middle of all this, we've got Devin Nunes, who has made a criminal referral of up to, I think, 8 people over to AG Barr. So we're not even close, I would argue, for this whole event to be over. We've got so much more intrigue that is brewing here. This is going to get very complicated.
It is, but the reality is that it's going to be worse for the Democrats from here on in than it is for the Republicans. I mean, I just, it's so ludicrous listening to the Democrats sit there and say, "Oh, you shouldn't use the word spying," or the idiot Comey, and he clearly now is demonstrating his lack of mental capacity. He sits there and said, "I've never thought of electronic surveillance as spying." It is they got authority under the FISA law, which is Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. It is how we spy. To say there's no evidence of spying when they went to the spy court.
The spy court.
It is truly unbelievable. And to listen to Comey sit there and say, "Well, I didn't consider it spying." I mean, really, it's not just that he's an idiot. It's such a indictment of our system that he could get to where he got.
It's almost as though Comey wasn't read in on an awful lot of things that were going on at the top floor of FBI headquarters. And when he began to see some things that he was, I think, somewhat left out, he decided to only save himself and not everybody else, because he hasn't really endorsed McCabe or Baker or Priestap or some of the others in his office. He's just staying on the protection of himself in the attack of AG Barr. So
look, you've seen what happened to Michael Avenatti.
Oh yeah, that's fun.
I mean, he's probably going to go to jail for a significant period of time if it's true that he stole from all these people. But here's my point. If you have committed crimes or at risk of crimes, it's not a good idea to be out front talking a lot, because all you're doing is drawing attention to yourself, and or you are taking the risk that you're in the public eye and they're going to look at you harder.
Yes.
Just shut up and go away.
I agree with that.
Everything he says can and will be used against him. He did commit crimes. He did leak things. He did leak things by his own admission for the purpose of getting Mueller to getting an independent counsel. So I don't know what that guy's doing out in front, but at the end of the day, you have Bob Barr, who is Bill
Barr.
Why'd you start that? Bill
Well,
Barr.
because he's a congressman, and I have interviewed him before. And he's
I
out
know
of.
where you got it. I don't know why you started me on it.
I'm sorry.
At the end of the day, Bill Barr is very law and order. He's a smart man, and he's not going to be snowed under by these ridiculous Democrats. And then you're going to get this IG report, which is, look, the FISA application now by all admissions was never vetted, certainly as it relates to using the dossier. Even Christopher Steele admitted that under oath.
Mm-hmm.
And was required to be vetted. And so there are clear violations. Now the question is whether someone should be, because it's, when I file a declaration in court, I have to say under penalty of perjury. They did. So they had to say it was true and correct. They had no reasonable grounds to say that. So what happens at this point? It's going to look worse for the Democrats. But when the Mueller report comes out, you can bet that they're going to claim the whole world turned again.
Let's go back to the spying thing here for a second, if we can, because, whether the word is spying, which I would argue is just a shorter version of
surveillance.
Yeah, exactly. But the one person that seems to, his name seems to be omitted in a lot of this is John Brennan. And
so far.
So, yeah, exactly. And, during all of this process, the Russians were going after Dana Rohrabacher, congressman out of California, to the point where even the Russians had given him an asset name. And the FBI had gone to Rohrabacher more than once and said, dude, you are being duped. So they gave him a heads up. The FBI then went over to Dianne Feinstein and said, hey, you have got a Chinese spy in your San Francisco office, and she immediately fired him. But they did not give that same courtesy or any part of that courtesy to Trump. But what is particularly interesting and also being left out of this is John Brennan spied, and it's not surveillance, this is spying on Dianne Feinstein's enhanced interrogation investigation in the Senate. Remember, originally he denied doing that. And then he he had to fess up.
John Brennan's a professional liar.
Yes.
And John Brennan is the reason why he was, I'm not saying it was his original idea to create the insurance policy against Trump.
Correct.
But he is the significant figure that pushed the narrative. He originally tried to push it on Clapper. Clapper shrugged his shoulders. So then he went to, and then he being Brennan, pushed it on Harry Reid, and then and got others to push it through to FISA. He did that. He knew when he did it there wasn't the information. It was the insurance policy, because they expected it to work. They never expected us, Trump presidency, and they never expected us to be sitting here today talking about them. So the reality is John Brennan, who has consistently lied publicly, there's no doubt that he broke laws and spied on Americans, and he should pay for that.
I'm missing the notion. Did Mueller interview Brennan?
I don't know that.
I don't know that either. So maybe that needs to be on a Post-it note here. And I don't know that any part of the congressional committees interviewed Brennan either. Was that possible?
Did he meaning not publicly, but behind closed doors? Yeah, I don't know the answer to that question.
That part could be quite interesting right there. Maybe we need to go down that path and determine if that happened, and if not, why. Because I would argue that Brennan may have been the grand marshal of this parade and pulled some I would say tools out of the CIA national security toolbox to do some of these things. He could very well be at the corner of this, and maybe left Clapper out of that mix. I don't know.
Well, Clapper, of course, lied on his on his own as well. And you know Brennan's guilty when he comes out immediately and says, well, maybe I was given bad
Yes.
information. No, you were the guy who actually generated and pushed it. And of course, the reason why he comes out and goes, maybe it's bad information, is because he's trying to say he was duped. He didn't do this knowingly with the intent to hurt anyone or cause any trouble or lie. But he's ridiculous. He's
Which
an
then,
embarrassment as well.
So what we have here is we have a bad leader at the FBI at the time, but now it also says to us we could have had a very bad leader, and likely did, at CIA, because I would argue that it was probably Brennan who told Obama at the time in a presidential daily briefing that Islamic State was the JV, right?
Yeah. Yeah, no,
Yikes.
Brennan was bad all along.
So we have Devin Nunes, who's got these criminal referrals, and he actually said something pretty interesting. You may or may not know, I think there are 8 names on this list, this referral list. We may or may not know all 8, but if we look very carefully, we could probably figure out at least 5 or 6 of them. And he was very cautious because he also said some of those people may not know themselves that they are on this list. So I was very curious of his statements, to the point where I think he's holding some aces in his hand that are going to necessarily set the world on fire here. What say you?
Well, yeah, this is an interesting. First of all, I've known Devin since he was in his 20s, and he has stood in the breach of time and history when a lot of people could have folded, and he has made a remarkable difference in American history. So
I read his book years ago. I liked it.
Yeah. So the point that I'm raising here with him is, don't underestimate him. They have always underestimated him, and I think he is responsible for. He was a major player in he keeping this going, and he could be blowing the lid off a lot of things.
He and Ratcliffe.
It's hard to tell exactly how large it could be.
Well, this is, for all of us out here that are kind of watching this, we can't really, it's really too early to form any kind of conclusions.
Yeah.
But it's almost as though we're solving a Alfred Hitchcock kind of thing here. But we have to go very slow because we're going to be sideswiped by some events and some names. Is that right?
Yes, but again, I think it still tilts against the Democrats significantly, because there never was, as I wrote in my Fox piece, when Dianne Feinstein on May 17, 2017, 11 months after the spying started, or the surveillance, right?
Mm-hmm.
Secret surveillance is called spying, by the way. 11 months after that started, she sat on the Intelligence Committee and the Judiciary Committee, and she said there were rumors but no facts. 6 days later, Clapper said when he left on January 20th, that would be 7 months after this process started, and he's the top spy in America, sitting above Brennan,
right,
sitting above Comey. He said he didn't have the facts. If those two people didn't have the facts at that point, then it didn't exist. And so this whole thing has been a charade at one level or another since then. And now someone wants to expose that, and the Democrats are losing it because they know they're guilty.
Well, we learned during the Kavanaugh hearings about Dianne Feinstein's mobilization of outside people to go after Kavanaugh. So I would argue that, there was a clandestine team that she had. With the insurance policy with Lisa Struck Lisa Page and Peter Strzok, we have found out that there was also a mobilized clandestine operation. So what we're really also finding out along with all of this is that we have these, I wouldn't call it necessarily shadow governments, but we have these operations that have gone on for a very long time that we haven't learned about, but now they're bubbling to the surface. So we're really finding out where a lot of these nefarious activities go on, I would say, on a regular basis. Yes?
Well, that's scary that you said regular.
I can't help it, but that's where it is.
Yeah, no, it is. It's that. It could be that bad. There's no.
Yeah, I think it is. I think it is.
And
well,
what troubles me is people always want to say, oh, we love the FBI or we love. We're supposed to be cautious as government. Thomas Paine, whose book Common Sense, sits by my bedside. The duty of a patriot is to protect his fellow citizens from its government. It is not to loud government, because when you give government too much power, corruption necessarily and always occurs.
Hat tip to you, Mr. Tom Del Beccaro, and thanks for your time on the Denise Simon Experience. Lots more that's brewing, ladies and gentlemen. We appreciate your time, and we'll see you again very soon.
Hey, Donna, Cowboy Logic Radio listeners love law enforcement.
That's right, Don. And Charity Magnets designs and produces beautiful, high-quality products for law enforcement supporters and enthusiasts.
They've got very impressive honor badge car magnets.
CharityMagnets.com.
They've got license plate honor badges.
CharityMagnets.com.
They've got cool keychains and license plate frames.
CharityMagnets.com. I'm on their website right now, and this is my favorite, the Honor Badge dog tag. Look at that little doggy with the dog tag. He's so cute.
Donna, we're trying to do an ad read, and you're playing around on their website, which happens to be CharityMagnets.com.
But he's so cute.
Donna.
Okay. Hey, this is huge, too. For each sale, a donation will be made to Cops for Kids with Cancer. Cops for Kids with Cancer has given more than $2.5 million in donations. Yes.
Become a Blue Honor Foundation member today. Like Donna is doing right now, go to CharityMagnets.com.
But he's so cute. All right, use the promo code MOJO for $5 off any purchase. I know you all love and support our brave law enforcement professionals and their families. Show your support today by going to CharityMagnets.com and check out that little puppy. He's so cute. Hey, Don, can we go to the pound, get another rescue dog, please? Pretty
No,
please?
Donna, no. 5 rescue dogs are enough, but I'm going to CharityMagnets.com, and I'm making some purchases right now.
Become a Blue Honor Foundation member today. Enter MOJO at checkout and get $5 off. CharityMagnets.com.